Hello everyone, and welcome to Meerkat's Guide to Smite. Today we'll be going over the very basics of the game. Smite is a third-person MOBA, where you play as gods from 7 different pantheons across ancient history, such as Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and so on. Today we'll be going over the very basics of the game, so let's get started. So let's first talk a little bit about the Smite overlay. Down here at the bottom, you will see your god's portrait, your level, and how much experience you need to get to the next. You'll also see the green bar, which is your health bar, and the blue bar, which is the mana bar. You need mana to use your abilities. Each god has 4 abilities, and their 4th ability is known as their ultimate. Every god also has a passive ability, which sometimes will be shown here, above your god's portrait. Down here in the left corner, you have your kills, deaths, and assists, your item build, and your stats, your basic attack damage, physical or magical power, physical defense, magical defense, movement speed, and attack speed. In the top right, you have your mini-map. On the right-hand side, you will have the list of the enemy gods, and whether they're dead or alive and how long before they respawn. On the left-hand side, you will see a similar bar for your team, except for your team, you will be able to see each of your teammates' health and mana, whether or not they're dead and how long till they respawn, and this diamond will light up blue when their ultimate ability is ready. At the top, you will see the amount of gold earned by each team, how long the game has been going, and how many kills each team has. This is the ability screen, where you can, by pressing K on your keyboard in-game, it will bring up your god's abilities. Your passive is listed at the top, and then your 4 abilities. If you look for abilities that have damage, you will see in parentheses and then a number. Each ability has a percentage of your physical power, which is listed down here, that is converted to extra damage. To see this percentage, you have to check out the ability in the God screen from the main menu. In Smite, there are a few different game modes. You have Arena, Conquest, Assault, Siege, Joust, and the Special Queue, which right now there's no special event going on, so there is no special queue that you can do. I will go more in depth on each game mode in their own guide, so be looking for those. So let's now talk a little bit about the different types of gods in Smite. Each god in Smite is listed as either a physical god or a magical god. Apwash, for example, is a magical god. He does magical damage with both his basic attacks and his abilities. Whereas physical gods, like Amuzen-Kab, for example, physical gods deal physical damage with their basic attacks and their abilities. No god can do both physical and magical damage. So remember that when you're building items, which I will discuss in a later guide. There are a few different classes of gods. There's Assassin, Warrior, Guardian, Mage, and Hunter. Each of these roles have their own special characteristics. But as always, there are some exceptions to the rules. Let's start with Assassins. Assassins are physical gods, and they tend to have high single target damage and good mobility for most of them. They are best at jumping on a single enemy god, killing them quickly, and then leaving the fight. That's what assassins do best. There are some assassins, like Thor and Hunbots, for example, that have more area of effect damage and good crowd control, where they are more suited to attacking a larger team as opposed to a specific god at one time. Assassins have high damage, but relatively low defense. So if you can catch an assassin out by themselves with a couple of your teammates, you should be able to quickly burst them down before they kill you. Now let's talk about warriors. Warriors are all melee and all physical. they tend to have fairly balance of attack and defense. Some of them have good crowd control, where others don't have a lot of crowd control. Like Guan Yu, for example, has a stun on his ultimate, but that's all. Whereas Hercules has a knock-up, a push, a stun in his kit. These gods are pretty good all around and can be built to either do high damage or be super tanky and defensive. And generally, they will have higher single target damage than they will area of effect damage. These characters also usually have high sustain, and a lot of them are coupled with heals. Chak, Guan Yu, Hercules, Sun Wukong, Vamana, and Bellona all have heals built into their kits. They give them a lot of sustain, and they can allow them to stay alive for a long time. Guardians are magical gods. They are all melee except for Hades, who is ranged, and Sylvanas, who, if you can see, he's not listed as melee or ranged, but he really is ranged. Guardians generally have a lot of crowd control, which are abilities that keep your opponents from doing what they want to do. For example, stuns, so they can't do anything. Roots, so they can't move. Knock-ups. Sobek has a pluck, where he dashes forward, grabs an enemy, and then throws him behind him. Ares has a cripple, which keeps you from using escape abilities such as jumps and dashes. Bacchus has an intoxicate, which makes you wobble around like you're drunk. And Cabrakan has a tremble, which does a fairly similar thing. Sylvanas has a pool. Ymir's got a stun. All these gods have a lot of crowd control, so they can help control the enemy, keep the enemy boxed in, so they can't do what they need to do to set up the characters with higher damage to kill them. Generally, Guardians have low attack, but if they're built right, they can have a lot of burst damage from their abilities, like Bacchus, for example, or Hades, or Sobek. You can get a lot of high damage out of their abilities. Not so much their basic attacks, but you can get high burst damage out of their abilities. Now, mages. Mages are almost all ranged, with the exception of Freya, who has an ability that allows her basic attacks to become ranged, so she's a little bit of a hybrid between ranged and melee. Ao Kuang is melee. Yeah, those are the two melee gods that are mages. The rest of them are ranged. Most mages, well, all mages, have low defense. A lot of them have good crowd control ability. What they have a lot of is area damage, for the most part. Like Agni, or an Isis, Janus, Nox, Kukulkan, Scylla, Vulcan, Ra. They all have high area damage. Poseidon especially. Their main job is to do a lot of damage to multiple characters. Not just a single character like you see assassins do, but multiple characters. And they get most of their damage from their abilities, with the exception of Kronos, Freya, and Ao Kuang. They're a little more auto-attack based. They're a little different. We'll go in depth a little more on how they're different when I do the Conquest Guide and I talk about the different roles. And finally, we move on to Hunters. Hunters are physical gods, and they are all ranged. These are your ranged carries in Smite. They do high damage, single target damage for the most part. Some of them have some big area effect damages, such as Cupid and Hu Yi. But generally, they're going to be single target damage, and a lot of their damage is going to come from their basic attacks. Not their abilities, but their basic attacks. So that's a little bit about the different gods in Smite. I'm going to get more in depth on all the different game modes in future guides. I'm also going to do god-specific guides where I'm going to go really in-depth with the different gods, teach you what their abilities do, how they play. Thank you for watching. Keep your eyes out for more Smite guides in the future, more Smite gameplay in the future, and of course, all other sorts of gameplay. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment your suggestions for what gods you want to see me do specific guides on. And subscribe so you can catch the rest of the guides.